The air in the back of the Mi-17 helicopter was a thick, humid soup of jet fuel, sweat, and unspoken distrust. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat nearest to the open door, her gaze fixed on the endless, suffocating green of the jungle canopy rushing by below. Her M4 rifle rested across her lap, her hands steady, her posture relaxed but ready. She was the quiet one on the team, the outsider, the Army Green Beret attached to this CIA-led Special Activities Unit for a mission that smelled wrong from the start. The team leader, a man named Marcus Thorne, oozed the kind of slick, Ivy League confidence that Eva had learned to associate with dangerous incompetence. He and his two men, both former private contractors with predatory smiles, treated her like a piece of required equipment, necessary for the official record but otherwise ignored. They called her the Army Package, a quiet, compact woman who didn't join in their crude jokes or their casual talk of off-books profits. They saw her silence as weakness, her methodical gear checks as rookie nervousness. They had no idea who she was. They had no idea that her silence was the practiced discipline of a hunter, and that she had spent more time in environments like this than they had in their cushy Virginia training centers. The official mission was simple: extract a high-value informant from a remote cartel compound. But the intel was thin, and Thorne's interest seemed focused less on the informant and more on the compound's logistics. Eva's gut, a finely tuned instrument honed by years of survival, told her something was deeply wrong. They landed hard in a small, steamy clearing a click from the target. The jungle immediately swallowed them. The air was alive with the buzz of insects and the distant cries of unseen animals. Thorne led the way, moving too fast, too loud. Eva fell into the rear guard position, her senses on high alert. She noticed the broken twigs that were too fresh, the unnatural silence in a patch of dense undergrowth. It was all wrong. They were being watched, herded. When they hit the compound, it was deserted. Eerily so. No guards, no cartel soldiers, just the lingering smell of stale food and fear. The informant wasn't there. Instead, in the main building, they found a single, hardened briefcase sitting on a dusty table. Thorne opened it without hesitation. Inside, nestled in foam, was not intelligence data, but a dozen bearer bonds, each worth $1 million. "Looks like our guy paid his way out," one of Thorne's men, a brute named Jax, said with a wolfish grin. "Change of plans," Thorne announced, his eyes gleaming with a greed that confirmed all of Eva's suspicions. "The asset has been liquidated. We secure the payment and exfil." He was fabricating a new story, creating a narrative for the official report that would cover their theft. "That's not the mission, Thorne," Eva said, her voice low and even. He turned to her, the friendly facade dropping, revealing the snake underneath. "The mission is what I say it is, Sergeant. You're just here to punch the ticket for the Army. Now grab your gear. We're leaving." But Eva didn't move. She had seen this before. Rogue operators, missions that turned into personal paydays. She had a duty, and it wasn't to these men. "I can't let you do this," she said. Thorne's smile was cold. "I was afraid you'd say that." He nodded to his men. Before Eva could even raise her rifle, Jack slammed the butt of his own into her side, knocking the wind out of her. The other man, Reyes, disarmed her, pulling her arms behind her back with brutal efficiency. They dragged her back to the helicopter, the bearer bonds now secured in Thorne's pack. As the chopper lifted off, climbing high above the jungle, they held her at the edge of the open door. The wind roared in her ears, whipping her hair across her face. Below, the jungle was a sea of green, broken only by the dark, yawning chasm of the Rio Negro Gorge. "You know, the official report will say you were a hero," Thorne shouted over the noise of the rotors. "Killed in action holding off a cartel ambush while we secured the objective. It's a good death." He looked at her one last time, a flicker of something almost like professional curiosity in his eyes. "It's a shame. You're good, but you're too damn noble for this line of work." Eva didn't struggle. She didn't plead. She met his gaze, and in her eyes, there was no fear. There was only a cold, terrifying promise. Then, with a final, contemptuous shove, they threw her out. She tumbled into the abyss, a silent, falling figure against a backdrop of endless green. Thorne and his men watched her disappear into the canopy below. They laughed, the sound swallowed by the roar of the helicopter. A fall like that was unsurvivable. The army package was delivered. The problem was solved. They had made a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. They had forgotten the most important lesson of their trade. Never, ever assume a green beret is out of the fight. The fall was a chaotic, violent symphony of snapping branches and tearing flesh. Eva didn't scream. Her training, the brutal, soul-hardening seer school, took over. Her mind became a cold, calculating machine. Asterisk, do not panic. Analyze. Act. Asterisk, as she plunged through the first layer of the triple canopy jungle, she twisted her body, making herself as wide as possible, using the dense foliage as a series of braking platforms. Branches, thick as her arm, slammed against her, shattering under her impact. The pain was explosive, a white-hot nova that threatened to swallow her consciousness, but she held on. She angled her descent toward the steepest part of the gorge wall, a near-vertical slope of mud and tangled roots she had glimpsed on the way up. Her goal wasn't the ground, it was the river at the bottom. The final impact was less a landing and more an obliteration. She hit the muddy slope, tumbling end over end, the momentum carrying her down through thorns and sharp rocks that ripped at her uniform and skin. She felt a sickening pop in her left shoulder, a grinding crack in her ribs. Then, the cold shock of the river enveloped her, dragging her under. The current was strong, pulling her into the darkness. Her lungs burned. Her vision tunneled. Asterisk, do not panic. Asterisk, with her one good arm, she fought her way to the surface, gasping for air, her body a screaming chorus of agony. She managed to grab onto a low-hanging vine and pull herself toward the bank, collapsing onto the wet, mossy ground. For a long time, she just lay there, the world a spinning, painful blur. She was alive, broken, bleeding, and alone, but alive. Thorn and his crew were gone, believing her to be a smear at the bottom of a ravine. That was their mistake. That was her advantage. As dusk began to settle, casting long, menacing shadows through the trees, Eva began her own protocol. Survival. First, the shoulder. It was dislocated, the joint grotesquely out of place. She crawled to the base of a large banyan tree, its roots thick and gnarled. Gritting her teeth until her jaw ached, she hooked her fingers into a crevice in the root and used her body weight to fall away from it. The sound of the joint popping back into place was a wet, sickening thud that echoed in the silent jungle. She nearly blacked out from the pain, but the arm was functional again. Next, the bleeding. She had deep lacerations on her legs and a nasty gash on her side where a sharp branch had impaled her. She tore strips from her trousers, creating makeshift bandages. Then she remembered her training, the unconventional medicine they had been taught for situations exactly like this. She found a colony of army ants, their pincers large and sharp. Carefully, she picked them up one by one, holding them to the edges of her worst wound. As they bit down, she twisted their bodies off, leaving the heads in place, their powerful mandibles acting as crude but effective surgical staples. The pain was immense, but the bleeding slowed. For the next 2 days, she became a creature of the jungle. She moved slowly, her broken ribs a constant, stabbing reminder of the fall. She found a small, hidden cave behind a waterfall to use as a base. She drank the clean water that trickled down the rocks. She found edible roots and larvae, her stomach churning, but her body grateful for the fuel. She was weak, but every hour, she grew stronger. Her senses, always sharp, were now magnified by the silence and the danger. She could hear the rustle of a snake in the leaves 50 yards away, smell the rain coming an hour before it fell. She was no longer just a soldier. She was part of the environment. On the 3rd day, she found their trail. Thorn's team was moving carelessly, leaving a path of broken branches, discarded ration packs, and boot prints that were as loud as a shout in the pristine jungle. They were arrogant. They believed they were ghosts, unaccountable and untraceable. They had no idea a real ghost was now hunting them. Eva felt a cold, hard purpose settle over her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. They had left her for dead, a loose end to be cleaned up. They had underestimated her, disrespected not just her, but the creed she lived by. Green Berets don't leave their own behind, and they certainly don't let traitors walk away. She began to move, shadowing their trail. She was slower than them, but she was infinitely more patient. She was no longer running. She was closing the distance. The jungle had not claimed her. It had armed her. And the men who had thrown her from the sky were about to learn what it felt like to be hunted by a shadow they had created themselves. Eva moved through the undergrowth with a silence that was absolute. Every footstep was deliberate, every breath controlled. She was a wraith, her torn uniform blending into the dappled light and shadow of the jungle floor. She was still in pain, her ribs a cage of fire, but it was a cold fire now, one that fueled her focus rather than hindering it. She was 2 days behind Thorne's team, but she was closing the gap. Their arrogance was her greatest asset. They were leaving a trail a child could follow, confident that their only threat was a fiction they had created for their after-action report. Eva found the remains of their first campsite. A fire pit, still warm. Discarded water bottles. A single, dropped 5.56mm cartridge. She picked it up, the brass cool against her palm. Ammunition. A resource. Her mind, the Green Beret's ultimate weapon, was already working, formulating a new plan. This would not be a direct confrontation. She was one, injured, against 3 armed and armored men. This would be a battle of attrition, a psychological war. She would turn the jungle, their perceived advantage, into their worst enemy. Her first move was subtle. She backtracked on their trail and began to alter it, creating false paths, moving broken branches to suggest they had doubled back. She used her limited knowledge of local guerrilla trail signs to create markers that would lead them in circles, into thicker, more difficult terrain. She was sowing the seeds of confusion, making them waste time, energy, and resources. That night, as they made camp, she struck for the first time. She didn't attack. She stole. While Reyes, the team's point man, was on watch, she circled the camp, using the chirping of insects to mask the sound of her movements. She slipped into the perimeter and made off with a single, vital piece of equipment, their satellite phone. She left no trace, no sign of her presence. The next morning, when Thorne went to make his check-in call, the phone was gone. A wave of paranoia washed over their camp. "Did you secure the gear, Reyes?" Thorne demanded, his voice tight. "I swear it was right here," Reyes stammered, his eyes darting into the dark trees. "It must have been locals. Guerrillas." The fear was a new, unwelcome companion. They were supposed to be the predators here. Now, they felt like prey. They started moving faster, more recklessly, their discipline eroding. Eva's second strike was designed to target their supplies. She found a narrow stream they would have to cross. Working for hours with a piece of sharpened rock and vines, she constructed a simple but effective deadfall trap, positioning a heavy, waterlogged log directly over the path. She baited it not for a man, but for the man carrying the primary supply pack. Jax, the brute of the team, was carrying the extra food, water purifiers, and medical kits. As he crossed the stream, he snagged the almost invisible tripwire. The log swung down with a sickening thud, not hitting him, but smashing directly into his pack, crushing its contents and sending them into the fast-moving water. They lost half their food and all of their medical supplies. Now they were not only paranoid, but hungry and without a safety net. "This is no local," Jax growled that night, his face grim. "Locals steal things. They don't destroy them. Someone is messing with us." Thorne's confidence was beginning to crack. He looked out into the oppressive darkness of the jungle. It no longer felt neutral. It felt hostile, alive, and intelligent. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Could she have survived? He pushed the thought away. Impossible. Eva's campaign of psychological warfare was relentless. She used her knowledge of the jungle to create phantom noises, mimicking the sounds of a jaguar stalking them, forcing them to waste ammunition firing at shadows. She contaminated a small water source upriver from them with a non-lethal but sickening plant, leaving them dehydrated and weak. She was a ghost, a malevolent spirit of the jungle, systematically dismantling them piece by piece without ever showing her face. She was taking their gear, their food, their water, and most importantly, their nerve. By the 5th day, Thorne's team was a wreck. They were exhausted, hungry, and at each other's throats. Reyes was convinced they were being hunted by a local death squad. Jax thought the jungle itself was cursed. Only Thorne, in the darkest corners of his mind, allowed the impossible thought to take root. What if? What if she had lived? That night, Eva made her move to rearm herself. She had herded them into a dense, foggy swamp. As they struggled through the knee-deep water, she used a long, hooked branch to snag Reyes's rifle sling as he passed. He stumbled, and in the confusion, she pulled the rifle silently into the murky water. He didn't even realize it was gone until they made camp. "My rifle. It's gone," he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. That was the final straw. They were being hunted, disarmed, and broken. The jungle was no longer a place of transit. It was their prison, and the ghost they had created was now their warden. Eva watched them from a ridge overlooking their camp. She now had a rifle, 2 full magazines, and a satellite phone. The balance of power had shifted. The fall had not been her end. It had been her transformation. The fog that clung to the swamp was thick and cloying, a gray shroud that muffled sound and played tricks on the eyes. Thorne's team was on edge, their movements jumpy, their whispered conversations laced with fear. Reyes was now unarmed, reduced to carrying a combat knife, his eyes darting at every shadow. Jax's bravado had curdled into a sullen, simmering rage. They were lost, hungry, and being hunted by an enemy they couldn't see. Captain Thorne knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, who was doing this. It was her, the ghost he had made. He had seen the signs, the sophisticated traps, the psychological torment, the way they were being systematically dismantled. This wasn't the work of local guerrillas. This was the work of a professional, a special forces operator turning their own tactics against them. He had to get his men to the extraction point. It was their only chance. 2 clicks north, he said, his voice a low growl, trying to project a confidence he no longer felt. "We move now. No stops." As they pushed through the dense, swampy undergrowth, Eva was already ahead of them. She wasn't just following them anymore. She was leading them, herding them into a final trap. She had used the stolen satellite phone not to call for her own rescue, but to listen. She had intercepted Thorne's encrypted transmission to his corrupt exfil team, learning their exact location and time of arrival. The extraction point was a small, rocky clearing on the far side of the swamp. Eva reached it an hour before them. She didn't set up a conventional ambush. She prepared the battlefield. She used her knife to rig vine tripwires, not for snares, but for noise. She placed sharpened bamboo stakes in the tall grass on the perimeter. She found a high point in the rocks overlooking the clearing and created a sniper's nest, perfectly camouflaged. Then, she waited. As Thorne's team broke through the tree line into the clearing, a wave of relief washed over them. They saw the open space, the landing zone. They were almost home. That was when Eva made her presence known. A single, perfectly aimed shot from her rifle hit the rock, just inches from Thorne's head, sending stone fragments stinging into his cheek. He dove for cover, screaming, "Contact!" Reyes and Jax scrambled behind a line of boulders, their faces masks of terror. They were exposed, trapped in the clearing. "Where is it coming from?" Jax yelled, firing blindly into the trees. "Show yourself." A voice, cold and familiar, echoed from the rocks above them. It was Eva. "I'm right here." Thorne peered over his cover, his eyes wide with disbelief. Standing on a rocky outcrop, silhouetted against the gray sky, was the woman he had thrown to her death. She was battered, her uniform torn, her face bruised, but she was alive, and she was holding a rifle. "Rostova," he breathed, the name a curse on his lips. "How? You forgot the first rule of this business, Thorne," she called out, her voice carrying an unnerving calm. "Always confirm your kill." Panic seized his men. Reyes broke cover, trying to make a run for the far side of the clearing. A single shot from Eva's rifle hit him in the leg. He went down, screaming, not in mortal pain, but in the agony of a disabling, non-lethal wound. She wasn't trying to kill them. She was capturing them. Jax, in a fit of rage, stood up and charged her position, firing his rifle wildly. Eva didn't move. She waited, let him get closer, then fired another single, precise shot. The round hit his rifle, shattering the stock and sending it spinning from his hands. He stood there, disarmed and defeated, his chest heaving. Now, it was just Thorne. "It's over," Eva said, her rifle still trained on him. "Give me the bonds." The sound of an approaching helicopter grew louder. Thorne's extraction team. He looked up at the sky, then back at Eva, a desperate, cunning look in his eyes. "You think you've won," he snarled. "That's not your ride. That's mine." But the helicopter wasn't the one he was expecting. This one was a sleek, black UH-60, bearing the insignia of the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. It swooped in low, and from its open doors, two Green Beret snipers aimed their rifles down at him. Eva lowered her own weapon. "I made a call on your radio, Marcus," she said. "I told them one of our own had been compromised. They were very interested." Thorne stared, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. He had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and utterly defeated. The ghost had not only survived, she had orchestrated his downfall. As the Green Berets rappelled down and took him into custody, Thorne looked at Eva one last time. "Who are you?" he whispered. Eva just shook her head. "I'm the soldier you forgot to kill." The jungle had fallen silent, the only sound the rhythmic chopping of the helicopter blades as it lifted off, carrying Thorne and his captured men away. Eva stood in the rocky clearing, the stolen rifle held loosely in her hand, the briefcase of bearer bonds at her feet. She was alone again, but this time, it was a victory, not a sentence. The Green Beret team leader, a master sergeant with a face like a leather-bound book, approached her. He looked at her torn uniform, the makeshift bandages, the deep exhaustion in her eyes. "Sergeant Rostova," he said, his voice filled with a quiet respect. "We had you listed as Kia. Your command is going to be damn surprised to hear from you." "They're about to be," she said, her voice rough. She handed him the briefcase. "This is the reason for all of it." The master sergeant took it, then gestured to the waiting helicopter. "Let's get you home, Sergeant." As she was lifted into the chopper, the jungle shrinking below, she looked down at the vast, unforgiving expanse of green. It had tried to kill her, and then it had saved her. She had been pushed from the sky, betrayed, and left for dead. But she had not only survived, she had prevailed. She had held true to her creed. Back at the forward operating base in Panama, the news of her survival and Thorne's betrayal sent shockwaves through the command structure. The official Kia report was rescinded, and a new, highly classified report was filed, detailing her incredible feat of survival and her single-handed takedown of a rogue CIA unit. Her commanding officer, a grizzled colonel who had been her mentor in the early days, met her in the infirmary. He didn't say much. He simply looked at her, at the stitches, the bruises, the deep weariness in her soul. He placed a small, polished wooden box on her bedside table. "The brass wanted to give you a medal," he said. "I told them you'd rather have this." She opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a new, pristine green beret, the flash of her unit, the 7th Special Forces Group, stitched proudly on its side. "Your old one was lost in the fall," he said. "We figured you'd earned a new one." Tears welled in Eva's eyes for the first time since the ordeal began. She wasn't crying from pain or exhaustion. She was crying from relief. She was home. A few days later, after being debriefed, she was given a choice. She could take an extended leave, a quiet desk job, or even a medical discharge. "What do you want, Eva?" the colonel asked. She looked out the window of his office, toward the training fields where new soldiers were running drills. "I want to teach," she said. "I want to run the SEER school. I want to make sure every soldier we send out there is as hard to kill as I am." The colonel smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that." In the end, Thorne and his men had been right about one thing. She was too noble for their line of work. But they had been wrong about everything else. They had pushed her from the sky, thinking a fall would be her end. But for a Green Beret like Eva Rostova, the fall was just the beginning of the fight. She had survived, she had hunted, and she had won. Her legend, once a quiet file, was now written in the heart of the jungle.